Good evening, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the General Purposes Committee. I'm Councillor James Flanagan, Chair of this committee. We begin with a safety announcement. There is no fire alarm planned for this evening. Should the alarm sound, please leave via the nearest available emergency exit. Two of the closest exits are through the glass door behind you to my left and through the double doors onto the riverside behind you. Please muster at Café des Amis. Members of the public are welcome to make their own recordings of the meeting using whatever non-disruptive methods they think are suitable. This meeting is being minuted, recorded and will be uploaded to the Council's website. The Westgate Garden gates on the riverside are locked at sunset, so members of the public must leave the Guildhall by the side exit behind the glass door. One thing to mention is the Guildhall voting system is not working due to server issues, so any votes tonight will be taken by roll call. Please remember, members, to turn on your mic when speaking and voting. Okay, so we move to item number 1, apologies for absence, please.
No apologies tonight, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 2, any substitute members?
No substitutes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 3, declarations of interest by members or officers. I'll hand over at this point to Andrew James.
Yeah, just on behalf of all members of the committee may know or have received correspondence from or spoken with some of the public speakers tonight due to their work as councillors. So that's just a general catch-all.
Thank you, Andrea. Do we have any other declarations of interest from members, please? Don't see anybody's hands raised. Thank you. Item number 4, public participation. So we have 6 public speakers for the meeting who will be heard directly before the relevant item. That's item 6. I'll come on to that shortly. But before we do, item number 5, minutes. We just have the process of going through the minutes from the previous 2 meetings of the General Purposes Committee, which are in your agenda tonight. This is pages 5 to 11. So I'll take those one at a time, and we'll do this by general assent. So the minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of December 2023. Does anybody have any comments? Yes, Councillor. No comments?
Just they will.
General assent? Thank you very much. I'll take that as voted through. And the minutes of the 29th of January 2024. Any comments, please? General assent? Thank you very much indeed. So we come on to item number 6, petition for Whitstable Town Council Community Governance Review, response to the stage 1 consultation. This is pages 12 to 171 of tonight's agenda. The way that we'll do this is we'll hear from our public speakers first, 6 public speakers. I will call each public speaker in turn. They will have 3 minutes to address the committee. As I call each one, I will ask the next speaker to stand by, so you know when you're due next in line of speaking. I'll then hand over to Matthew Archer from Democratic Services, who will introduce the report for tonight's meeting, and then we'll open up to debate with a recommendation of the proposals put through, the draft recommendations, and then we open it up to debate amongst the committee. So in terms of speakers, the first public speaker we have tonight is Bernadette Fisher. Bernadette, if you could come forward, and could Ashley Clark stand by, please? Thank you, Bernadette. The floor is yours.
We feel disappointed at the overall result. Whether the total numbers are because petition signatories thought they had done all that was needed, as per our feedback, or had changed their minds, as for, and it's a total of 8 responses, is a matter of conjecture. But the overall figures speak for themselves, so we do not dispute the first of the report's 4 recommendations. Our response is in 2 parts. So the first part is urging you to make concrete your statements at the top of page 20 regarding our concerns with the forum's legitimacy, status and resources, as well as the need for local voluntary groups to have more hands-on assistance from the City Council, as the more modern town councils provide, with things like their constitutions, trustees and most critically, applications for funding. Please work with us and others to concretise this help and act immediately to set up and give reliable support to an open public services hub in the town where people can be signposted to services and information, where groups can meet and share free resources, something we've wanted for at least a decade. So the main thing, the big one, is we're looking for a more neutral response to the idea of a smaller town council for Gorrell and Tankerton wards than what we consider to be the partial, confusing and very negative recommendations at 2 to 4. The data is there in the numbers and Michael will show it, but more importantly, in the positive comments from people wanting a town council because it will help the whole town. We refute the suggestion that a smaller council could damage social cohesion. Chesterfield Parish Council doesn't do this. A town council for an area containing the town centre, most of the community's assets, and well over half of households would be clearly beneficial to the wider CT5. We don't think there's a basis either for the suggestion that people paying the precept would resent others benefiting either in the responses or the way other town councils work. There's no purpose in being so negative on a smaller town council in the recommendation. The proposal could and should be simple and neutral for stage 2, whatever your views. Similarly, effectiveness is only an issue if you compare it to the original all CT5 proposal. A town council for Gorrell and Tankerton would have fewer resources and less precept, but it would cover that central area and it would benefit all of CT5. It would also be larger than most parishes, well above the NALC's larger threshold, and could become the basis for a cluster of local councils, which is something that the LGA, in fact, is recommending. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I ask Ashley Clark to step forward and Patsy Roden to stand by?
Evening all. The CT5 group only came into existence as a result of the council decision to abandon the area members panels, which were expensive in terms of officer time and poorly attended, other than when issues relating to dogs were on the menu. Having attended some CT5 meetings, attendance is not much better, and many of those present are what I would call political activists. Petitions are rarely an accurate measure of public support. A persuasive canvasser can get all sorts of people to sign something if the full facts are not put across. Half-truths are like half-bricks. They travel further. In that sense, this consultation was useful, but as I predicted, the vast majority of local residents did not participate. Things cited in the documentation were already catered for by the district and county council, by some ward councillors, and importantly by local voluntary groups. And I include in that some of the local churches who actually get out and do things in the community and at no cost to the council taxpayer. Such groups also attract outside funding like lottery money and can work in tandem with district council officers. I know this to be a fact because for the last 18 years I've been leading the voluntary group that manages what is now known as the Gorrell Valley Nature Reserve, as well as trebling the area from the original Duncan Down of some 30 acres. We have gained 18 consecutive green flags for excellence. Last year, volunteers gave in excess of 1,000 hours. We have raised money with the lottery and in other ways. The Sea Salt Christian Centre does splendid work with young people locally and is expanding in that area. At Tankerton, a voluntary group has magnificently carried out work to make the main street attractive and welcoming, and another group has resurrected the carnival. Viable, well-motivated groups like this merit support from the district council, but alas, this council has ended the member opportunity fund allocations of £1,000 per member, which enabled fast-track support to such groups. Instead, such money could have helped in real ways, but has been wasted on this folly. For many years, the Whitstable Society has acted as a statutory consultee on planning issues. With a wealth of valuable experience, they have shown their willingness to rattle cages, which on occasions has had a salutary effect on the periodic shortcomings of the planning department. That is a useful function, notwithstanding the fact that in the current climate, any attempt at democracy in planning is undermined by the Planning Inspectorate, the vacillations of government policy, developer wealth, and the appeals process.
Sorry, Ashley, could you conclude your remarks, please?
Yeah, I'll just do the last come up. As I say, my maxim has always been, if it works, don't fix it. It's just simply not good value for money. For the chattering classes, £80 a year might not be much, but there are many out there who can ill afford this. Such an imposition is not an act of public good, but simply unkind.
Thank you.
Following the clear rejection, any notion of
Sorry,
a
Ashley, could
reduction
I
of-
ask you to conclude your remarks, please? Just a minute over.
I've got one sentence left. Following the clear rejection, any notion of a reduction of town council area is divisive and merely moving goalposts.
Thank you. Thank you, Ashley.
All I was going to say, it's the
Thank you very much. Thank you. We'll have to move on. Sorry, it's well over a minute, but thank you very much.
thank you.
Can I ask Patsy Roden to step forward and Michael Bax to be ready to be the next speaker?
Good evening. Bit nervous. I appreciate many towns do and would benefit from a town council. Whitstable is not one of them. I was born and grew up here, and I've seen many changes, including the loss of Whitstable Urban District Council. Now, many people who supported the town council proposal thought, mistakenly, it could replace that, believing Canterbury City Council to be too Canterbury-centric. There was, during the campaign, I feel, a lack of awareness of the precept, that it was uncapped and that they could be saddled with an ever-increasing financial burden, which many can ill afford. Some have said, on the feedback, social media, they wouldn't have signed the petition had they known. But the objections are not just about the money. Whitstable is an extremely community-minded place. For example, Revival Cafe helps people of all ages with mental health issues and social isolation. The same for the Umbrella Centre. Plenty of activities to attend every day. All Saints Church provides secular activities to combat loneliness. The same for the Waterloo Centre, who also have a dementia cafe with legal advice. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what is available, and all of them are savvy enough to apply for their own funding. Even the one that CT5 People's Forum said Canterbury City Council and KCC can't apply for. And of course, they can apply for the many grants and funding offered by KCC and Canterbury City Council, amongst others. The amount of fundraising and campaigning by groups and individuals is amazing. People giving freely of their time. Only last year, a group raised funds to match those offered by Canterbury City Council to improve Cornwall Circle play area. And speaking of Canterbury City Council, they haven't ignored Whitstable as much as people think or has been implied. They've developed the harbour and continue to do so, and are now tackling the swimming pool and tennis courts, amongst other things. And of course, they can and should do more. Our local councillors also work hard to improve the town, recently getting the Estuary View Health Service bus service reinstated. In recent years, I've gone to them for help with a planning application. It's what they're there for, to help us. And like Canterbury City Council, we need to keep them accountable. Now, all of these things are what the Pro campaign have said they can do. Well, it's clear we don't need them. We're doing it for ourselves. This campaign has lost significant support since the petition, and there is no appetite for any version of a town council. You only have to look on social media, although Canterbury City Council can't. If it's proposed for a few wards, that could be very divisive and damaging for the town. At best, a town council here would just be duplicating what we already have. At worst, a group of amateurs or self-serving individuals who don't know what they are doing and what will benefit the town, playing with our money like a game of Monopoly.
Thank you,
Please don't
Patsy. Can I
waste
ask you to
any
conclude
more
your
of our money.
remarks? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Could I ask Michael Bax to step forward and Chris Stanley to stand by, please?
Amateurs and self-serving individuals. I hope she wasn't talking about you. My presentation's been shared with you. I'll give you a shorter version. The government process in the 2007 Act was to promote the extension of local democracy. It set up a process with a very high hurdle and some very simple rules. Its presumption was in favour of the extension of democracy. It did not give councils unfettered ability to halt the extension of local councils. We over-delivered on that high hurdle in a fully compliant basis with the Act. Negative opinions in the consultation represent only 3.5% of voters in the various wards. Basically, no one turned up to oppose it. Yet the report proposes to take the view of a tiny proportion of voters and rejects the voice of a petition of nearly twice the size. How can this be correct? There are 27 equivalent councils in the CCC district, all very small. They represent 44,000 of our inhabitants. Gorrell has 6.5 times the average population of the 27, and it has no council. Can you explain the reasons why CT5 voters should not have the same rights as their peers throughout the district? I can't. The report involves significant manipulation and false representation of data. It's silent on the large number of people in the petition. It only focuses on the people who had an adverse opinion. It falsely states that Gorrell is 2 wards in a section titled, and I quote, top line results by district ward. Gorrell's not been 2 wards for years, and you all know that. Only Gorrell was divided up. Why was this done? It's simple. The majority of Gorrell opinions were in favour of the town council. It treats all wards as the same size. This also is not true. Simply speaking, the votes of Gorrell and Tankerton represent more than 50% of the inhabitants of CT5, and they too spoke in favour of the new council. Not one of the reasons advocated in the report for rejection are supported by any data whatsoever. It's all basically conjecture, which is not the standard required by the Act. And as for the reasons for denial, viability, is there anybody here who believes that a council for 29,000 people would not be viable when the existing 27 councils in CCC apparently are? There are no differences in the law covering parish or town councils. It should be obvious to anybody that if Wickham is viable with its 400 and something people, then so should CT5 be. Cohesion. The guidance of the Act allows councils in section 95 to reject proposals that would cause ethnic, religious or cultural separation. Do we really consider a risk of race riots in Tankerton if a council is approved? The report's conclusions are ridiculous and clearly not compliant with the guidance to the Act. In my area, I see an engaged, unified and dynamic community within clear boundaries. The community obviously meets the standards required by the guidelines to the Act in every way. Arguing that somehow the area is not a coherent, viable community insults the town and its voters, and that's not compliant with the Act. Simply put, the report is a crude attempt to deny the people of CT5 the right to local democratic representation. This is what they are asking you to approve. It is, in my view, shameful, and doubly so that the process is driven by some of those elected to represent us. I hope you will have nothing to do with it.
Thank you. Could I ask Chris Stanley to step forward and Councillor Chris Cornell to stand by?
Slight throat problem, so I might Right, thank you, Chair. Just to answer a couple of points that Patsy made, we analysed all the consultation document comments word by word. Only 7 people in all that consultation mentioned the business of the signing the petition and not knowing that the precept was uncapped. So we looked at all that, and there's lots of evidence of lots of extra funding, to answer our other point, extra funding that town councils and parish councils can get, that the district and the county council can't get. So
Sorry,
there's lots of extra
sorry,
money.
Chris. Would you be able to speak into the microphone, please? I'm afraid not everybody can hear.
I'm probably too
Thank
tall.
you. Try that.
So, what Michael's covered some of the points, but if you take the Gorrell and the Tankerton wards together, that's half the population of CT5. And Gorrell voted in favour of a town council, and Tankerton voted in favour of a town council. And we're suggesting that you look at doing the consultation for the next phase on those 2 wards. So they're large wards. We're advised that they'll be some of the largest in the country with 11,000 voters. And I've got a statement here that we've been advised regularly by the Jonathan Owen, who's Chief Officer of the National Association of Local Councils. He told us that Canterbury City Council is in danger of missing a golden opportunity to establish a town council where support has been demonstrated for local autonomy, tackling Whitstable's priorities and improving events and facilities. The National Association of Local Councils is disappointed with the direction outlined in the report and would encourage the City Council, as part of the next round of consultation, to consider all options more positively. Given the support for the role of parish and town councils of all sizes by the Local Government Association, the District Councils Network, it is surprising the City Council is taking this approach, which is well out of step with the national developments. Parish and town councils are increasingly playing an important role because the pressure on discretionary spending on principal councils can help those councils and communities to get through this financial challenge. More and more councils are being created up and down the council. There literally are thousands. Around our coast, every town has a town council. We're surrounded by parish councils, 27 of them in our district. While the council as a whole, Whitstable, is desirable, they're clear in majority to support the parish for Tankerton and Gorrell, which is, you could see the larger council, that would give, as I said earlier, 11,000 voters in those 2 wards. Be one of the largest in the countries. It would sustain a precept of about £500,000 if you had a precept of around 80. And that would trigger, as far as the National Association is concerned, that we would become a larger council, and that gives us all sorts of benefits as well. So just putting those 2 wards together wouldn't be a small tin pot little council. It would be a very important council in the National Association's views, and I urge you to back that line in the next phase.
Thank you very much. And could I call Councillor Chris Cornell to step forward, please?
Good evening, Prince. It's fair to say that the last month or so has been quite emotionally charged in Whitstable. It's been a difficult decision. And over the last 3 weeks, sadly, I've lost a few friends deeply committed to the town council process. But simultaneously, I've appreciated the collegiality of the working group who approached this task with a diligence, thoughtfulness and open mind, which I commend. At the beginning of this process, the working group considered what the worst case scenario might be for this stage in the process. And it's fair to say that's probably what we have. There is a small area in the centre of town where there is evidence of support, but very little electoral mandate to proceed. A group of 600 or so seeking to influence tax of over 23,000. Throughout our deliberations, we strove to answer the question we've been posed. The forum wanted to pursue a town council for the whole unparished section of CT5. They chose the widest area and then prepared a campaign which gave examples of how other similar-sized councils operated. They asked us to consider whether people in CT5 want a town council. The evidence is plainly no. Whilst some may have been disappointed at the total number of people to respond to this consultation, it was the petitioner's responsibility to prove a need for change. On our part, we wrote to every household and saw nothing to suggest that a wider consultation would have changed the result. In fact, the more that we engaged people and the longer that the CT Forum campaign continued, the smaller the support levels got. Almost 1,800 people signed the original petition to commission the review, and at the end of stage one, only 39% of this figure, 660, are still in support. As you will have seen, we gave due consideration to a smaller area where the support was stronger, but came to the conclusion that a smaller town council in Harbour and Tankerton would not, in the words of the campaign documents distributed by CT5, be a united voice for Whitstable. Neither would it be similar to town councils elsewhere in Kent, achieving the parity which the original petition demanded. The mandate for a small town council was weak. In Tankerton, the only ward where the majority voted in favour, the numbers of support to vote yea was only 4.1% of the electorate. In Gorrell,
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. If Chris could continue uninterrupted, then we'll go on to the debate a bit later amongst members.
In Gorrell, it was 3.5%, well below the 7.5% threshold which was needed to kick off this process. Whilst we were very impressed by some of the staff we spoke to from other town councils, their testimony as part of the witness sessions identified that the cost of democracy was a problem largely solved through economies of scale. They spoke about how town councils differed to smaller parish areas. Overall, if the working group could have recommended that we end the consultation process at stage one, I think we might have. However, the guidance says that we should consult on the findings, and as such, we're proposing a period of feedback. At the beginning of stage one, the group were agnostic. Having reviewed the facts, we now believe that Whitstable shouldn't have a town council, and we welcome comments before making a final conclusion. Consciously, we're not proposing a stage two consultation which looks anything like stage one. We're not seeking to repeat an exercise already done or incur substantial cost. We're seeking qualitative responses to our recommendations that with the belief that deviating from this plan would be perceived as shifting the goalposts and erode the fragile faith that some have in democracy. The group believe the results are quite conclusive and that putting forward alternative proposals is neither wise or justified. We hope that you can support that recommendation.
Thank you very much. Could I thank all our public speakers for coming along tonight? Thank you for your contributions. We will now move on to the report itself. So please could I ask Matthew Archer to introduce the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So the report summarises the consultation results and presents the advisory group's draft recommendations to the committee. These recommendations, if approved, will be submitted to Council next week for final approval, and then we will be seeking views on the propositions before submitting final recommendations for approval. The CGR guidance does not specify what form the consultation should take, but we felt that this was an important issue, and so the decision to write to all 15,000 households and include an explanatory leaflet was felt to be important to ensure that everybody was well informed in making their decisions. We ran 3 events, generally well attended. Over 200 people in total attended the 3 events, and they were held in 3 different venues across the town to ensure the greatest reach. We used all our other usual means to publicise these events. We're aware that some of the letters arrived after the meetings had been held, but word generally got round by other means. We published an online version, and the answers to every question raised during the events was also published to make sure that every question that had been raised was then available for everybody to understand. Overall, the proposal was rejected by 1,014 people, or 56% of those who responded. Of those who did respond, there was clear rejection of the proposals in Chesfield, Seasalter and Swalcliffe, and the group were therefore not minded to recommend any proposals in that area. And the original proposition for the petition was therefore rejected. The areas of Gorrell and Tankerton, as has been said, were more balanced, with a narrow majority in favour in both areas. The initial results were published by postcode, where CT5-1 was supportive and CT5-2 narrowly against, further demonstrating the narrow difference of view between those in favour and those not. Gorrell is significantly larger than the other wards and represents a diverse community. There was a noticeable divide in the heat map between the area north of the railway line, which we've named Harbour in the report, and that to the south, which also includes significant areas of deprivation within it. The report sought to identify this to aid transparency rather than seek to manipulate the results. It's trying to explain what the working group was looking through during its analysis phase. It's unfortunate that there's an alternative interpretation. That certainly wasn't the intention. Further analysis then showed that the area of Gorrell to the south of the railway line, which we've badged as Lower Gorrell, opposed the Town Council with numbers, coincidentally, that were reflective of the overall results. As a result, the group were minded to draw this distinction between the two areas, and that's why there is that distinction within the report. It's the only ward presenting this kind of mixed picture, which again is the reason why it's included. That left the area in the centre of Whitstable, labelled Harbour in the report, and the Tankerton ward as those who were clearly supportive. And there has been a challenge to say that any town council or parish council created in that area would not be viable. That wasn't the intention of what was being said. What we were saying in the report was pointing out that the ratio of costs is affected by the economies of scale, and this was something that we learned through the witness sessions. Obviously, the number of staff that you might have for a town council differs quite significantly from the number of staff that you might have within a parish council. The powers are the same. Structurally, they can look quite different, and we were just trying to make that distinction, bearing in mind the fact that most of the consultation conversations have been around comparable town councils of comparable size to the whole of Whitstable. On the questions of interest within the community, yes, this is a question of balance. Views have become polarised. The remaining proposition was felt to be quite far removed and not reflective of the original proposal. And the interests of the two areas were felt to be quite distinct in their neighbourhoods with separate senses of place and identity. As the guidance says, identification of a community is not a precise or rigid matter. And it was for the community at large, through their comments, and for the advisory group through its local knowledge, to interpret that within the Whitstable context. The conclusion was that it wasn't necessarily in a position as an entity to speak on behalf of the whole of Whitstable, and the economies of scale were such that it might struggle to deliver the kind of ambitions that have been articulated through the consultation, and it was not therefore a proposal it was minded to recommend. The points around effective and convenient governance within the report, I've touched on viability, that wasn't necessarily core to it. Those who opposed were clearly indicating that the cost of the new layer of democracy, the functions already supported through the City Council and the County Council, and the support already provided within the community were all factors that were taken into consideration at the time. And so therefore what's put forward is a proposition. It's not the final recommendations, these are draft, and the intention is to now go out to consultation on whatever it is that Council in the end decides should be the final recommendations that are put out for comment and for views. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. We're now going to move on to the debate. Before we do, we need to move the recommendations. The recommendation to Council is as follows, and I'll read it out for the purposes of the recording tonight as well. Item 1, that feedback is sought on the following draft recommendations. Based on the findings of the consultation, the advisory group has not recommended an alternative boundary for a smaller town council. Instead, it recommends a qualitative approach, inviting comments, opinion and evidence which supports or disproves the following 4 propositions. Firstly, that a parishing of the whole CT5 area does not represent the interest of the community given the lack of public support. 2, that the splitting of wards in Gorrell will damage community cohesion by forcing only some in an area to pay for largely shared services and resources. 3, that a smaller parished area covering Harbour and Tankerton lacks community cohesion given the lack of public support and distinct unique identity of both settlements, therefore is not recommended. 4, that a smaller parished area covering Harbour and Tankerton will neither be effective or convenient in achieving the original aims of the petition to create a single voice for Whitstable and incapable of delivering the range of projects presented by the petitioning organisation. Item 2, that feedback is obtained through written representations using the means set out in the report. Item 3, that the revised timetable be approved. Do I have a seconder, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Brady. We're now open to debate. Do I have any members who would like to make any comments? Councillor Wheeler.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a very difficult one. Personally, when this matter first arose, I didn't know whether a town council for Whitstable was a good thing or a bad thing. All right. Yep. Sure. So yeah. So I said personally, I didn't know when this first arose whether a town council was a good thing or a bad thing, and I still remain at that position. So I'm very neutral in this. So I think I'm quite well placed to speak on this. I've listened to friends argue, residents argue. So my feedback, first of all, noting that the governance review, I think, was confusing for people because it's like it's the first time I've heard of one. Most people didn't know what it was. And I kept saying to people, you need to get involved. And quite often the response was, yeah, but we'll get to vote on it at some point, won't we? And it's like, no, it doesn't work like that. So I really think that in the literature sent out, there should have been a big headline saying, you will not get to vote on this. Because people's understanding of democracy is we vote on things, especially important things like this. So I really feel that that should have been spelled out because it's kind of vague that there's a first stage review and then there's another second stage. So maybe I won't get involved with it. Or it's like this confusion. It's like I signed the petition, wasn't that it? And I'm saying, no. So I was doing my best to try and clarify to people, it's really important. The first stage is very important because recommendations might be that there will be no town council, as has happened. But I don't think that actually reflects the views of people who thought they would get a firm say on this. That's just democracy. So I put that to people. This kind of spurious back and forth about social cohesion and north-south divide, when is a ward not a ward? Well, when it's Gorrell, it would appear. And, I'm a councillor there, so I'm a bit concerned about this. We could, if we went back to last May's election and we did the same splitting of the ward, would we have 2 Green councillors and 1 Labour, or would it have been different? I think it's kind of quite dangerous to start playing these sort of games, looking at heat maps, whatever. It looks kind of good, but if a ward's a ward and that ward has voted in favour, are we then going to say that that doesn't count? I think that's a bit dangerous myself. I don't like that. So looking at it objectively, I don't find this notion of Tankerton and Harbour not being cohesive. I don't hear people saying, I'm in Tankerton, I'm not going to, I don't speak to people down in Harbour. I think that's spurious. So there's a lot in here that I just, although it's kind of put in kind of fancy language in the recommendations. I think if you just talk to a lot of people on the streets, they won't really recognise this, to tell the truth. So I personally have some, would like to go through these things and maybe see if we can amend something. If that's okay, Chair, I may have. Yeah.
Members are able to make amendments if they so wish. We would need to hear those amendments. If you're proposing an amendment, there would need to be a seconder.
Yep. Okay. That's good. So I'm going to sort of do this on the hoof. I'm not fully prepared, but I think, where are we? Page 12, isn't it? Right. So I would like to think that item 1.
So item 1 of the recommendation
Yes.
just read out. Yeah.
So I'm going to go 1.1. So where it says the parishing of the whole of CT5 area does not represent the interests of the community given the lack of public support, I would rather that the view was that the parishing of the whole of CT5 was not endorsed by the review.
Are you proposing that as an amendment,
As an
Councillor Wheeler, to the
yeah,
wording?
Yeah. Number 2, I think.
Sorry, could I just ask you to repeat that, if that's okay?
Okay.
If there's multiple amendments, we'll note them
All
down
right,
as
sorry,
we go
I'm
through.
doing this on
Thank
here.
you.
So, yeah. So the parishing of the whole of the CT5 area was not endorsed by the governance review.
And sorry, you want to end at that point?
I
with
do,
full stop?
yeah. I keep it simple and short, that's me, yeah. Item 2, can I go on to that?
Well,
Or do you want to?
individually?
No, let's have the.
We'll take them as a whole, and then
Okay.
we'll see.
Yeah.
Then
I
we'll discuss.
think item 2, there's a real problem because it says that the splitting of wards in Gorrell, and there aren't wards in Gorrell. There is one ward. So I think that would need to change. And where it says will damage community cohesion, I think we should, I propose we remove number 2 because it doesn't make sense.
Propose to remove the whole of
Yeah.
number 2.
Yep.
That's item 1, part 2.
Yeah. And then if I can move on to, sorry, just scrolling. I think I would like to, that item 4 quite simply say that a smaller parished area covering Gorrell and Tankerton be recommended for further consideration.
So on item 1, part 4, you suggest that your amendment, Councillor Wheeler, is that a smaller parished area covering Gorrell and Tankerton be recommended
For further consideration.
and to be clear, for further consideration as a town council.
Yes.
Have that one noted down? Yeah. So that's 3 amendments that you've proposed, Councillor Wheeler. Yeah.
Yep.
Any others at all?
No.
Is there a second? And we'll just debate and see.
Do we have a seconder for those amendments, please? Or would it be easier to seek a seconder on each individual amendment?
We could do. Yeah.
So your first amendment was, is that okay? Yeah. Your first amendment was that a parishing of the whole CT5 area was not endorsed by the governance review. Do we have a seconder for that, please? Have a seconder. Okay. That item 1.2, that the splitting of wards and Gorrell will damage community cohesion by forcing only some in an area to pay for largely shared services and resources. The amendment or the recommendation, or the proposal even, was to remove it. I'll get there in the end. The proposal was to remove it completely. Do we have a seconder, please? We don't have a seconder. And then your final one was item 1, part 4, that a smaller parished area covering Gorrell and Tankerton be recommended for further consideration as a town council.
Yes.
Do we have a seconder, please? Councillor Wheeler, I'm kind of open-minded. I don't have a view either way on that. But for the purposes of openness and debate, I don't have a view on that, but I would like to hear the debate. So for that one, I will act as the seconder for the purposes of hearing the debate here at the committee. Okay? So that opens that up. Now we'll debate that particular amendment. So the other two have fallen, but this one will be debated. I know that Councillor Ian Stockley and Councillor Smith raised their hands. Would you like to speak on the amendment, councillors, or was that more on the substantive?
It was substantive, but I'm quite happy to talk to the amendment.
Okay, Councillor Ian Stockley, if you'd like to go next.
Thank you. As a matter of record, I was working with the group on this, and I would like firstly to thank the officers and the
Councillor,
working
can I ask you to speak a little bit further
Sorry,
into the microphone?
okay.
That's right.
As a matter of record, I was on the working group, and I'd like to thank the officers and indeed the working group. I didn't find it shameful. I found it very informative. I personally feel that I'm a bit binary. We were asked by the petitioners to look at a specific area. We looked at that area. The council has spent an undisclosed amount of money. I'm not sure what that is, but they've spent a substantial amount of money contacting various people in that area by various means. The return on that was quite good as consultations for the council go, but when looked at as a whole, wasn't overly impressive. 1,847 people out of a possible 23,499. So we're left with a position where we have a substantial number of people, about 700 people in the area, who feel that they're not being well represented. But it's clear to me that the threshold was set, the consultation was carried out, and the result was no. And as has been said by various speakers, moving the goalposts at this point, while we're prepared to listen to what's coming back from people now on the second part of this, I think to consider further shrinking the area down, that's not what we're asked to do. And I don't think it would be fair to those people involved who have voted no to now move the goalpost substantially and allow it to go forward. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I also sat on the Community Governance Review. Regarding Councillor Wheeler's amendments, I mean, it's the Governance Review that who is submitting this to General Purposes Committee. So your item 1 isn't necessary, I don't think. I don't think it's relevant on that element, because it's the Governance Review. I can't quite remember what your wording was, but it was about that this is the Governance Review, but the whole thing is from the Governance Review. The splitting of the Gorrell wards, and I do understand that this has caused a bit of, people being a bit disconcerted about this. The results in the working group, we very much felt, because there's 3 of us that were in the working group sitting here, that the heat map for the yes and no votes for Gorrell were markedly different between the north and the south of the railway tracks. And one is a much more deprived area than the other. It was felt now, this is quite a marked difference. When you look at the whole areas for the yeses and the nos, the yeses are concentrated in what was Harbour and Tankerton. So that's why it was to see how that looked and how the figures came out as well. Yes, overall Gorrell voted in favour, but there is a marked difference. And if you're going to tax people, which none of us stood on a mandate for, you have to be very careful about who you're taxing. So that's the other point. And I think, again, I'm concerned about a shifting goalpost. I think there's an awful lot of people felt that Canterbury City Council was trying to put this onto people and not And we're already, so I'm very aware that it'd be just people will feel that they are, oh, well, they're just trying to push it through whichever way they can. And I don't think that's what people want. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Councillor Old.
Thank you, Chair. Also, in the interests of transparency, I should say that I was also a member of the group, the review group, looking at this. And I'd also say that I was in favour of the consultation, but that doesn't mean I'm necessarily in favour with either of the outcomes of the consultation. It's just that having the debate is something I think that would be useful, and so it's appeared. Just returning to the point made by Councillor Stockley, he's quite right. The petition asked the question, the proposed town council area to be within the unparished boundary of the CT5 postal district. We asked that question and the results were quite clear. 56-38. What we're now doing, and I apologise to members of the group who've heard me say this before, is a classic statistical fallacy called the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. Do Google it, I'll speak slowly. But basically, this is characterised by a lack of a hypothesis prior to gathering data. So we've gathered the data, and now we've tried to look at the data to see if we can establish a pattern. That's not the right way round. The Texas sharpshooter fired at a barn door and then came along afterwards with a target and said, oh, look, I've hit the bullseye just there. And that's what we're doing. People have referred to it as cherry-picking data, but this is also like gerrymandering. People have said that they're unhappy with the result, but they were in favour of democracy. Well, unfortunately, one of the outcomes of democracy is you sometimes get the result that you're not in favour of. I realise this was not a vote, but I think we have to say that the conclusions on the question that was asked have been clear and that now is the time to stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any other councillors who wish to comment or make any points on the amendment that Councillor Wheeler proposed? In which case, we will vote on the amendment, which I'll read back, that this was item 1, part 4, that a smaller parish area covering Gorrell and Tankerton be recommended for further consideration as a town council. And Andrea will now call out our individual names. And as usual, please say for, against or abstain.
Councillor Brady.
Against.
Councillor Buckman.
Against.
Councillor Edwards.
Against.
Councillor Flanagan.
Abstain.
Councillor Old.
Against.
Councillor Smith.
Against.
Councillor Ian Stockley.
Against.
Councillor Jeanette Stockley.
Against.
Councillor Wheeler.
For.
Thank you. So that has fallen with 1 vote for, 7 against and 1 abstaining.
Thank you very much. So we now move back to the substantive, which is the 3 main recommendations. Item 1 has 4 parts to it. Would anybody like to speak on those particular points? Councillor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed that feedback is obtained through representations using the means set out in the report. I wonder if, I would hope that we could have actually face-to-face discussions with petitioners, etc., and if that is part of something that we can do in this second stage. So I'm asking Matthew that one. Thank you.
Matthew.
Thank you. Yes, I believe we included within the report that we would certainly talk to the petitioners, and if we were invited to attend any other public sessions, then we would consider each of those. Obviously, I'm directed by the councillors, but yes, the idea I think is to complete a different sort of consultation, but nonetheless one where when we're invited, we will consider it.
Thank you. Councillor Ian Stockley.
Thank you. If it transpires at the end of this process that Whitstable doesn't get a town council, I do think that we are in a position where we have 700 people, as I said earlier, or thereabouts, who feel less than represented by Canterbury City Council or indeed the CT5 group. Can we ask council to consider looking at an appropriate means? I'm probably going to get derided for suggesting a forum of sorts because I'm part of the group that got rid of them. But a lot has changed over that period. And I think it may be, you know, there were many problems with the forums. The forums, as have been said, were not particularly representative. They cost a lot of officer time and a lot of money. So we do need to look at how this can be achieved. But I do think that the representation of the town, Herne Bay included, needs to be looked at. You know, obviously people can talk to their councillors, but to get an overall picture of the councillors for that town may be more difficult. And that's where I think a meeting such as forums or a democratic meeting that is supported by the council may be advantageous. And I realise I'm going off at a weird tangent here, but I do think that we have seen a number of people who feel that we aren't representing them fully, and we do need to address that. And that may be where we're going with the second part of the consultation, but I do think we need to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I, before I move on, can I just on Councillor Ian Stockley's point, Matty, Councillor Ian Stockley was mentioning about another body. Would that be something that the advisory group at the next stage, depending on the consultation responses, could that be something that they consider at that stage?
It could. I mean, the report at page 20, and I think one of the speakers alluded to this, it does talk about the advisory group felt that the council might be open to a conversation about how to address some of the concerns or opportunities. And I think there's different ways that you could crack the nut. So obviously one of the reasons why the forums were abolished was around capacity, and so those sorts of conversations would need to be had with the leadership to see what capacity and budget availability there is to perform whatever functions we do. And so maybe there are other alternatives as well that might be considered as part of that. I think it's probably part of a wider report with a series of options.
Thank you. Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Chair. You just covered what I was the main point of what I was just about to say. I was going to talk about process. Stage 1, consultation, results came back, working group looked at that. They've given recommendations which have come to this committee. We look at the recommendations and then that goes out for a second analysis and then goes back to the working group. So within that process, if there's a lot of information that comes back and suggestions saying we want to be represented by a community hub, we want to be within those 4 recommendations, and I've heard a lot of arguments against these recommendations. Stage 2 is the process when a lot of people can put those arguments against those, and then the working group can look at that and it comes back to us. So I think some of the discussions from the speakers, thank you for speaking, I think it's really good for everybody to come and voice their opinions. But maybe that was a little too early, because we can hear those again at stage 2. And I think that's the point. We need to look at the process, consultation made, working group looked at it, made those recommendations. The recommendations go off and then can be argued against. All about process.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, I just wanted to say a couple of things, but that was part of it, to pick up on some of the points in that and some of the points that the speakers made. I mean, when I came to the meeting and we voted to go for this consultation, I was confidently expecting that we would be coming back with a yes. I mean, that's just my expectation. I thought there was a lot of emphasis behind it and a lot of push, and it looked like it was something that may well get a lot more support than it has. But I do think it is a straightforward result, and I think that we can't restructure a consultation that we've had and pretend that we're still part of the same consultation. It would be something entirely different. And I think some of the points that have been made about the different groups represented, despite the fact that I understand that splitting the CT5 into postcodes, you know, may be a device. It's still a device that shows something about that community. So I think that I have no problem with the recommendations and the point of them, but I do think that you know, there was a momentum behind this. There was a push to get this, and you know, there have been, you know, a couple of sections of the community who are still keen to see that. So I would just support what's just been said about, please let's have those suggestions about how we can work better with this part of the community that seems to be part of the community anyway, that has, I mean, according to this, you know, that does have quite a lot of groups, and maybe we're not working well enough with those groups. And I'm very mindful that we've got real problems about resources and forums and so on. So it's not an easy or quick fix maybe to start talking about some other form of structure. But I think we should listen to it and try and find out how we can and take that forward when we get the representations. And I'm presuming that most of the things that have been said tonight will be said as part of those representations. So I will be supporting these recommendations, but I would like to see us do what we said we would do in thinking through the way forward with the community as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anybody else who would like to? Councillor Buckman.
Yes, it's about sort of the apathy or the people who haven't come out to put any recommendations in at all or filled in their questionnaires. Is there a way of publishing this information a bit more widely? I know we spoke when you were doing the presentations in different halls and areas. If we can go, if you can publish them in more wider areas around CT5, so it can be seen by more people, and then there might be a, you know, there might be more of a where the heat map's the coldest, basically. Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I think in terms of trying to ensure that we reach the whole community, we did pretty much everything that we could have done. I think the decision to write to every household isn't something that we're obliged to do. It's certainly something that was carefully considered, and then obviously that was added to the consultation. Now that we have the results, we've been communicating them through social media, but we've been waiting really for the outcome of the report tonight and then at council before we start the next stage of consultation, where we can talk about the results that we've had. So I think it's where we've got to is we did a lot of work promoting the consultation while it was live. We've now had a period of deliberation. Obviously, we published the fact that these results were being debated tonight and then again at council, and we'll publish again once we start the next stage of the process. So our reach on social media is theoretically about 35,000. Obviously, we can only engage with those who want to engage with us. We go out to obviously try and reach those who are sometimes harder to reach. But we can only work with those who want to engage with us.
Just add something. So I just wouldn't feel comfortable about leaving this committee without saying it. I just don't think it would be particularly fair to ask households to give a council more money in this time of this time of where we are now. Really, it's just this cost of living. It's just whatever the amount is. You know, no one has that much disposable income. And I wouldn't feel very comfortable by doing that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, look at particularly reach of people. I know, for instance, that 4,000 people saw a post about town councils, but only 1,800 people bothered to fill in the response. I pestered people to make sure you respond. Don't moan at me. Make sure you respond. If you want it, you need to tell us. If you don't want it, you need to tell us. And people just didn't, because they have to go log on, put a thing in, and it's that difficult, you know, for people sometimes. But I do know that a lot more people knew about it, but a lot of people just didn't bother to fill it in because they didn't think it was relevant.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have anybody else who wishes to? Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, just echoing a lot of the comments, Councillor Smith, a lot of people just didn't get it, didn't know what a governance review was. So that's why I think the response was less than the significant number of signatures that were gathered, which, let's face it, was, you know, in terms of votes for, was more than most of us here got in the election. You know, 1,700, certainly more than I got to sit here, or probably most of us here. So, so I think we must still not dismiss that or play around too much with the fact that there were less responses than the initial petition. I think that really needs to be considered more, given more weight to it.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else for any comments? Can I just ask a question? So we've spoken a lot about consultation, and so if this goes through, the next stage is to invite qualitative comments back. So it is a form of consultation. And presumably that is for, well, it would be open for anybody for or against the recommendations. But presumably we're also looking for evidence either way, depending on what people's feelings are on the recommendations. So the request would be for anybody responding to provide evidence to support their particular view, as in a normal consultation process.
Yes, that's right. So as per the wording in the recommendation.
Thank you. Final request for anybody who wishes to make any comments. Councillor Brady.
Thank you. So just to clarify, we'll be going back to the people that engaged with the consultation directly, and then we will be spreading the net further to be able to get more opinion from the other people that didn't engage in the consultation. But I think it's really important that engagement is habit forming. So you would assume the consultation, the respondents who have already engaged will engage again to clarify their views. So that would be beneficial. And I think, as Dane said, then hopefully we can try and find others that may comment.
Thank you. Councillor Stockley.
Yeah, thank you. Given that this is a district-wide financed project, I feel that it should be open to everybody within the district if they have a view. Obviously, it might be weighted towards Whitstable residents, but as this is costing everybody in the district a substantial amount of money, I think everyone should have a voice. Thank you.
I think that would be the case, would it, Matthew?
Yes, it would. We just ask people to clarify where they're from so that we can help identify that in the analysis. I think in practice for the stage one, I think it was 98% of the people were from Whitstable in the event. So, but we do try and identify that as part of the responses.
Okay, I don't see any further hands raised, so we will therefore move to a vote. Same process again. Andrew will call out councillors' names. And just to remind councillors that this is a recommendation to full council. The full council meeting next Thursday, I think, isn't it? 25th of April. This is what the recommendation will go to, and then brought before and debated at full council. Andrea.
Thank you. Councillor Brady.
4.
Councillor Buckman.
4.
Councillor Edwards.
4.
Councillor Flanagan.
4.
Councillor Old.
4.
Councillor Smith.
4.
Councillor Ian Stockley.
4.
Councillor Jeanette Stockley.
4.
Councillor Wheeler.
Against.
Thank you. So that's carried with 8 votes for and 1 against.
Thank you very much. That concludes item 6. Again, can I thank our members of the public who have spoken here this evening. We're very much appreciative of your comments and of your views. Thank you. Item 7, any other urgent business to be dealt with in public? I'm not aware of any other urgent business. Item 8, any business that requires exclusion of the press and the public. Again, I'm not aware of anything. No. And finally, item 9, any other urgent business which falls under the exempt provisions of the Local Government Act 1972 or the Freedom of Information Act 2000 or both. Always read that out. I'm not aware of any.
No.
Okay. Right. Well, thank you, everybody. Can I thank members of the public for attending tonight? Our council officers, thank you very much. And members of the committee, thank you very much and have a safe journey home.